Today's review comes courtesy of patron Kether Pterodyne. Kether has requested a novel from a long-running series known as the Honorverse, named after its protagonist, Honor Harrington. Specifically, I'll be taking a look at the second book in the series, The Honor of the Queen. Now, I've never read the Honor series before, so I'm not sure why we're starting with number 2, but here we go anyway. About the author. The author of the Honor Harrington series is David Weber, who was born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1952. His love of writing started early, supposedly in the 5th grade, and when he reached high school, he started taking odd jobs in the publishing business, like typesetter and copywriter. It's no real surprise then that he got a master's in English when he went to college in North Carolina. However, Weber had more than one passion. He was also an avid wargamer, which means he was playing the same tabletop games that would inspire Gygax and Arneson to develop Dungeons & Dragons. Weber helped create some wargames too, specifically a 4X board game named Starfire. It uses a science fiction setting, and some of Weber's first published works were tie-ins to the game. Anyway, as you must have guessed by now, Weber is a big fan of speculative fiction, and has written exclusively within the genre. At the same time, though, he's also a big fan of military history and the tactics and strategy of war, so it should be no surprise that his works include a lot of combat, whether they're fantasy or science fiction. The Honor Harrington series is a perfect example of this. The Honorverse setting takes place around 2,000 years in the future, and for most of that time humanity has been colonizing other planets, a movement called the Diaspora. Despite taking place in the incredibly far future, however, the series is very heavily influenced by the Horatio Hornblower series, written by C.S. Forester from the 1930s to the 1960s. And since the Hornblower series follows a British naval officer during the Napoleonic Wars, the Harrington series follows a naval officer of a very British-style monarchy, and starship combat uses terms like broadside and grapeshot, despite how they refer to very different things in the future. Still, the two characters aren't exactly the same, and neither is the world or universe around them. But I think I'll get more into that after I describe the story. Honor Harrington is a captain of the Royal Manticoran Navy. Manticore is a fairly large constitutional monarchy ruled, at least in name, by Queen Elizabeth IV, and at the moment tensions are brewing between them and their neighbor, the People's Republic of Haven. Haven is a police state, and it's similar in size and technology level to Manticore, and so while war is basically inevitable, both sides are taking their time with it and building up their forces. In the first book, Captain Harrington destroyed a Havenite secret weapon with a light cruiser, and so she's been rewarded in this book with command over a heavy cruiser, the HMS Fearless. As for her background, Honor was born on a high-gravity world, and so she's been genetically altered to be stronger and taller than a baseline human. And while they were at it, they also improved her intelligence. She's also physically younger than her age thanks to rejuvenation technology, but most Manticorans can afford some amount of that. Honor has a pet tree cat named Nimitz, and it has this weird empathic ability that bonds him to his owner and lets him sense things like hostile intent in others. Let's see, oh yes, and she also drinks hot cocoa instead of coffee or tea. Honor's first mission with her new command is to escort a diplomatic envoy to the strategically important planet of Grayson. Grayson was founded by religious extremists back during the original colonization rush, their aim being to establish a new society free of modern technology. Sadly, they landed on a planet covered in deadly amounts of heavy metals, and so they wound up needing a lot of technology just to survive. However, they were successful in other areas, including the oppression of women through polygyny and the restriction of all political rights. Still, the people of Grayson aren't as bad as their neighbors on Masada. A few hundred years ago, an extremist branch of this already extreme religion arose, and to give you some perspective, they tossed out the entire New Testament because they don't believe in a loving God, and they brought back stoning as a form of execution. The moderates and extremists had a civil war. The extremists lost, and so they were exiled to Masada, which, oddly enough, turns out to have been a nicer planet. Nevertheless, the Masadans have sworn to either force Grayson into the true way or exterminate the heretics. Both planets have strategically valuable locations, so while Manticore is seeking an alliance with Grayson, Haven is secretly supplying Masada with ships and weapons. There's an admiral in the diplomatic envoy, but technically he has no commission, and so Honor is the ranking officer as captain of the largest ship in the escort. That's kind of a big deal in Grayson because they don't let women work outside of the house, let alone in the military. Honor thinks that her being there is a mistake, but she was personally chosen by the Queen, probably so that the Graysonites would have to confront the fact that a woman is the head of the Manticore state. Now on the bright side, Admiral Courvoisier is the personal friend and mentor of Honor, so he helps her deal with her misgivings. Both Grayson and Masada are technologically backwards, and so the envoy also includes several freighters full of high-tech equipment and foreign aid. Oh, and the delegation includes a token peacenik named Houseman, who dares to believe that wars aren't inevitable, and that economic ties discourage armed conflicts. I'll admit he's being a bit unreasonable about his opinions, but the book plays him up as a straw man. The book cuts over to the Masadans, specifically to Sword of the Faithful Matthew Simmons and Captain Alfredo Yu, who is technically under Simmons' command. I say that because Yu and his fellow Havenites have technically immigrated to Masada, and the fact that they know how to run the Haven ships that were gifted to the nation is sheer coincidence. For his part, Yu is appalled by the Masadan fanaticism and their views on women, but he puts up with Simmons for the sake of Haven's foreign interests. He's also irritated because Simmons and the Masadan Council of Elders are terrible strategists who refuse to attack Grayson while the Manticore escort is present, even though the Haven ships are more powerful. Honor's visit to Grayson includes as much surprise and disgust as she expected, although some Graysonites are reluctantly willing to accept that Manticore ways are not like their own. It also doesn't help when the Havenite ambassador on Grayson stirs the pot by spreading word of their own version of the Basilisk incident, in which Honor didn't destroy a secret Haven weapon, but instead killed hundreds of innocent civilians on a freighter. It's a paper-thin story, but the misogynists on Grayson are willing to believe it. As such, Honor decides to go with half the ships to escort some of the freighters to their second destination. For his part, Admiral Courvoisier has better luck talking with some of the relatively progressive members of Grayson's elite, particularly the planetary protector Ben Mayhew, who was educated off-planet. Mayhew and the others like him are ready for Grayson to modernize, both technologically and culturally, but there's still a big majority who like the way things are, and while Mayhew is the chief executive of Grayson, he's mostly just a figurehead. However, with half the escort gone and the biggest ship with it, Masada chooses this moment to strike. They attack Grayson's orbital food platforms, but they follow a very predictable pattern, and so Courvoisier intercepts them with the rest of the escort. Unfortunately, this means they fall right into Masada's trap. In the ambush that follows, Courvoisier dies, but the Manticore ships are able to destroy a number of Masadan ships and cause them to withdraw from Grayson's space, much to Captain Yu's frustration. Honor Harrington finds all this out when she returns to Grayson, and she blames herself from running away from Grayson's misogyny instead of confronting it head-on. A few Masada light attack craft get a hit or two in before she realizes what's going on, but after that she sends one of her destroyers to Manticore for reinforcements and then meets with Grayson's military leaders. Oh, and Houseman turns out to be a craven coward who wants to evacuate instead of defend Grayson, because of course he is, and so Honor slaps him to the ground and practically gets a standing ovation from everyone else in the room. Anyway, Honor demands a personal meeting with Protector Ben Mayhew so she can make Grayson coordinate their forces with her, and Grayson's council reluctantly allows it. Meanwhile, we find out why Masada retreated. They don't want to be beholden to Haven, so they've planted secret agents in Grayson's government and security force, and they have them try to assassinate Mayhew and blame Honor and Manticore so their own people can take over. Fortunately, Honor's tree cat senses danger and attacks one of the disguised agents, so Honor kills a whole bunch of them until a shot takes out her eye and part of her face. Honor and Mayhew both survive, the Masadan sympathizers get shot or arrested, and since the fight was recorded, Grayson's council stopped getting in Honor's way. Now with free reign, Honor deploys a secret Manticore sensor system that uses gravity pulses to send information faster than light speed. She uses the sensors to find Manticore's remaining light attack craft, and thanks to documents seized from the sympathizers, she also finds out about a secret base on a moon of a gas giant. Honor rushes over to the base to destroy it, and she finds out it's being guarded by one of the Haven ships. It does some damage, but Honor disables it and takes some prisoners. And when she does so, the enemy commander tells her that some of her people survived the original ambush and are being held prisoner and worse in the base below. So she sends in her Marine complement to capture the base, which they do, and she discovers that the Masadans have been raping and torturing the female captives. Back in Masadan space, their Council of Elders decide to return to Grayson to nuke the planet, but only on their own terms. So they fill the remaining Havenite ship with Marines, supposedly to transport them elsewhere, but then they turn on the Haven crew. Captain Yu figures out what's about to happen just in time to do something about it, and he issues an order to cripple the ship and evacuate. They don't manage the first part, but they do manage the second, which means Simmons is now in charge, and he has no experienced crew for his ship. Nevertheless, he returns to Grayson space to destroy what's left of the escort fleet and glass the planet. Honor realizes all of this when Simmons' ship appears, and she's dismayed to discover that the ship in question is a battle cruiser, the next class up from her own heavy cruiser. Fortunately, Simmons' inexperience causes him to make a series of mistakes during their battle, and so Honor is able to destroy the battlecruiser just after her reinforcements arrive and before it can drop nuclear bombs on Grayson. After the battle, Honor receives prestigious medals from both Grayson and Manticore, and she's made a steadholder in Grayson so that they can start working on women's rights. This qualifies her to hold the rank of Countess in Manticore, and just for fun, she's also made a Knight of the Order of King Roger. And that's the end. The analysis. First, allow me to compare protagonists for a moment. Now, this is not something I would normally do, at least not so specifically, but Honor Harrington is explicitly inspired by the Horatio Hornblower series, and so the author is inviting this comparison. And honestly, I find Honor a bit lacking. Horatio Hornblower is an absolute mess of a person. For one thing, he's low-born, and that's a major disadvantage for a man who lives in a time and a place where the vast majority of the officer corps is made up of nobles. He's also clinically tone-deaf, so he can't enjoy music outside of percussion. And he gets extremely seasick extremely easily, so he's basically useless on board a ship until he gets his sea legs, about a week into a voyage. On top of that, he's very socially awkward, which is a problem since ship captains were expected to be well-mannered gentlemen, diplomats, and ambassadors when they were abroad. Hell, he only married his first wife because she was helplessly in love with him, and he figured he might as well make her happy, even though he didn't care for her one bit. However, Hornblower is also intelligent and well-educated, a shrewd strategist with an incredible poker face, a quick-thinking tactician who adapts to the changing battlefield, and a good leader who earns his men's loyalty and avoids using the draconian laws of the day. Now, Hornblower does eventually get rewarded for all of his hard work and talent, but he only gets it after going through the worst period of his life. After clawing his way up to captain of a ship of the line, Hornblower gets overwhelmed by a French fleet and is forced to surrender. He then has to escape a French prison, cross the French countryside as a fugitive, hijack a ship, and then cross the English Channel to get home. Only then does he get a big payday for bringing in a prize ship and a knighthood for exemplary service to the British Crown. This happens in the 3rd book in publishing order and the 7th book in chronological order. Now you might have guessed it by now, but I've read all of the Hornblower novels, and I admit they color my perception of the Honor Harrington series. Compared to Hornblower, Harrington seems like she's got it easy. She's genetically engineered to be superior to a baseline human. She's bonded to a space cat who can sense danger and maul her attackers. She lives in a more egalitarian society where low-born officers getting command positions isn't a big deal. She gets a noble title in her second book, and not after having to surrender and escape from enemy territory. I mean, I'm not saying she doesn't have problems. In the honor of the Queen alone, Harrington gets her eye shot off, she loses her mentor, most of the ships under her command get destroyed or disabled, and at the end she has to face a battle cruiser that, under competent leadership, would have blown her heavy cruiser into irradiated particles. It's just that Hornblower has to face worse odds than that, and he has much deeper character flaws to contend with. And so, to me at least, he comes off as a much more compelling character. Then there's that straw man bit in the novel. Houseman has some good points about how trading and economic reliance are good for deterring war, but he is wrong in this case since the main conflict is a religious disagreement that goes back centuries, and both sides are isolated from each other and the greater galaxy. Even if both sides played along and made some token trade agreements, they'd be decades away from being so interconnected that they'd suffer from declaring war. And besides, even trading partners have declared war on each other. My problem is not that this guy has the wrong idea. My problem is that this guy has a very obviously wrong idea. An idea so wrong that even an economist would tell him that he's barking up the wrong tree. He's not here to present a diplomatic counter-argument, he's here to show how ignorant and cowardly pacifists are, and thus how honorable and glorious and intelligent the military is by comparison. And please keep in mind, by the way, that from what I can tell, David Weber never served in any armed forces, but is an active member of the NRA. Oh yeah, this book is also about sexism, isn't it? Well, for that there's really not that much to analyze. Those from Grayson and Masada are either intelligent and regretful of the way their societies treat women, or they're fanatics who can't get over the idea of women in uniform and do terrible things to them in the name of their religious convictions, and who have all of the character depth of a kiddie pool. So, to sum up, despite the tone of this analysis, I would say the Honor Harrington series is worth reading. However, I would also say that the Horatio Hornblower series is even more worth reading. Thanks for joining me again for today's book review, and I hope I'll see you next time for a second Dungeons & Dragons tie-in book.